Et alors?
Nous devions quitter la ville le lendemain matin, très tôt. Quand je suis partie, il dormait encore.
Trapped, conflicted, and painfully real. For many, it was their first glimpse of the actress beneath the icon. But the real Brigitte Bardot lived a life even more dramatic than anything on screen, filled with passion, controversy, heartbreak, and an unexpected second act that shocked the world. This is the wild life of Brigitte Bardot from Contempt, the girl who never wanted stardom. Brigitte Anne-Marie Bardot was born on September 28, 1934, in Paris, into a comfortable upper-middle-class family. Her father, Louis, was an engineer who worked in the family business manufacturing liquid air and acetylene. Her mother, Anne-Marie, had studied theater and dance as a young woman, but never pursued a professional career. She poured those unfulfilled ambitions into her daughter. From age 5, Brigitte took ballet lessons. By age 13, she was studying at the National Superior Conservatory of Paris for music and dance under Russian choreographer Boris Knyazev. She was talented, disciplined, and seemed destined for a career on the stage. One of her classmates was Leslie Caron, who would go on to Hollywood fame in An American in Paris. But Brigitte's path took an unexpected turn at age 15. A photographer for Elle magazine saw her and asked to feature her on the cover. On May 8, 1950, Brigitte Bardot appeared on the cover of France's leading women's magazine. She was strikingly beautiful, blonde, with full lips and expressive eyes that seemed both innocent and knowing. That cover caught the attention of a young aspiring filmmaker named Roger Vadim. He was 22, she was 15. He became obsessed with her. For 3 years, he pursued her, writing letters, visiting her family, slowly winning over her parents. Brigitte fell in love with him, but her conservative Catholic parents initially refused to allow the relationship. Finally, when Brigitte turned 18, they relented. On December 21, 1952, Brigitte married Roger Vadim. She was 18 years old, and he immediately began shaping her into his vision of a new kind of woman, free, sensual, unbound by conventional morality. That same year, Brigitte made her film debut in a comedy called Crazy for Love. Her career had begun, though she'd never particularly wanted one. And God created woman. For the first 4 years of her career, Brigitte appeared in small films, playing minor roles, building experience, but not yet breaking through. Vadim watched and waited. He was writing a script specifically for her, a film that would change everything. In 1956, And God Created Woman went into production. Vadim directed. Brigitte starred opposite Jean-Louis Trintignant, playing an 18-year-old orphan named Juliette, living in Saint-Tropez. Juliette was liberated, manipulative, and completely unapologetic about her desires. She seduced men, played them against each other, and answered to no one. The film featured extensive nudity and that shocked audiences in 1956. French censors tried to ban it. The Catholic Church condemned it. And in America, the film became a sensation. Lines formed around the block at art house theaters. American men had never seen anything like Brigitte Bardot. She represented a European sophistication and sexual freedom that seemed impossible in puritanical 1950s America. Mamie Van Doren, an American actress, remembered standing in line on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles to see the film. She watched Brigitte on screen and thought, why can't I do that? But it wasn't just the nudity or sexual. It was Brigitte's complete naturalism, the way she moved, the way she inhabited her body without shame or self-consciousness. Overnight, Brigitte Bardot became an international sex symbol. The press called her the sex kitten. French intellectuals debated whether she represented liberation or objectification. None of it mattered to Brigitte. She'd never wanted to be famous. Fame found her anyway, and it would never let her go. But her marriage to Vadim was crumbling. By 1957, just 5 years after their wedding, they divorced. Vadim had created Brigitte Bardot the icon, but he'd lost Brigitte the person somewhere in the process. The Saint-Tropez years. Between 1957 and 1963, Brigitte made film after film. She worked with major directors, Henri-Georges Clouzot in The Truth, Louis Malle in A Very Private Affair, which was semi-biographical and explored her discomfort with fame. She appeared in 17 films between 1952 and 1956 alone, and the pace didn't slow down. By the early 1960s, she was one of the highest-paid actresses in Europe. Her personal life was equally chaotic. In 1959, she married Jacques Charrier, a handsome French actor. In January 1960, she gave birth to their son, Nicolas Jacques. Motherhood did not come naturally to Brigitte. Years later, in her autobiography, she would write devastating things about that pregnancy and her son, describing the child as a tumor, admitting she'd tried to abort by repeatedly punching her stomach. Nicolas would eventually sue his mother over those passages, and a French court ordered Brigitte to pay damages for the emotional harm she'd caused. They became estranged for years. Brigitte admitted she would have preferred a dog to a child, and that brutal honesty, while shocking, was also vintage Bardot. She refused to pretend or perform the role of doting mother when that wasn't what she felt. Her marriage to Charrier lasted only until 1962. Between her marriages and relationships, Brigitte was linked with an astonishing array of famous men: Warren Beatty, Sammy Frey, Serge Gainsbourg, Bob Zachary. She lived openly, loving freely, refusing to hide her affairs or pretend to be anything other than who she was. Saint-Tropez became her refuge. She owned a villa called La Madrague, and she retreated there whenever possible. The small fishing village became fashionable largely because of Brigitte. She popularized the bikini, sunbathing topless on Mediterranean beaches at a time when such behavior scandalized many. She made Saint-Tropez synonymous with a certain French hedonism and joie de vivre. Contempt and Jean-Luc Godard. In 1963, Jean-Luc Godard cast Brigitte in Contempt, a film about a screenwriter's crumbling marriage. Brigitte played Camille, the wife who falls out of love with her husband after he essentially pimps her out to an American producer. The film was produced by Joseph E. Levine and starred Jack Palance as the boorish American producer and Michel Piccoli as the weak husband. Godard was one of the leaders of the French New Wave, known for experimental films that broke all the rules of conventional cinema. He saw something in Brigitte beyond the sex symbol image. He saw intelligence, melancholy, a woman trapped by her own beauty and fame. The film opens with Brigitte lying naked in bed, asking her husband if he loves her body, her breasts, her legs, her face, everything. It's a vulnerable moment, a woman seeking reassurance, and it set the tone for a film that was surprisingly introspective and psychological despite its surface glamour. Shooting Contempt was difficult. The production filmed in Rome and on the island of Capri. Godard was demanding, often improvising, changing scenes at the last minute. Brigitte struggled with the material. She was used to lighter roles, frothy comedies, and melodramas. This required her to access deeper emotions, to play a woman losing herself in a dying relationship, but she delivered. Contempt became one of Godard's most accessible films and one of Brigitte's finest performances. Critics who had dismissed her as merely a pretty face had to acknowledge her ability to convey complex emotional states with subtlety and grace. The film remains a masterpiece, and Brigitte's work in it stands as proof that she was a genuine actress, not just a phenomenon. The Gunter Sachs Fairy Tale. In July 1966, Brigitte married for the third time. Gunter Sachs was a German millionaire, a playboy, a photographer, and documentarian. He was also, controversially, a former Nazi Party member and honorary SS officer, though he'd been very young during the war. Their courtship was the stuff of legend. Sachs reportedly courted Brigitte by hiring a helicopter to drop hundreds of roses over her Saint-Tropez villa. They married in Las Vegas. The marriage lasted 3 years, ending in October 1969, though they remained friends afterward. Sachs remarried later, and in 2011, at age 78, he took his own life at his home in Switzerland, reportedly suffering from Alzheimer's disease or a similar condition. During these years, Brigitte's film career continued. She starred in Viva Maria in 1965 with Jean Moreau, playing revolutionaries in a vibrant, visually stunning comedy. She made Dear Brigitte, her only American film, appearing briefly as herself, while James Stewart played a professor whose son develops a crush on her. The film wasn't particularly successful, and it reinforced Brigitte's decision to avoid Hollywood. She preferred working in France, where she had more control over her image and her roles. Parallel to her film career, Brigitte pursued music. In the 1960s and 1970s, she recorded more than 60 songs. She collaborated most famously with Serge Gainsbourg, the French singer-songwriter who became one of her many lovers. Together, they recorded songs that became legendary, though not always for artistic reasons. In 1967, they recorded a duet that would become one of the most controversial songs ever made. The track featured heavy breathing, suggestive moaning, and explicit themes. Brigitte, uncomfortable with its provocative nature, begged Gainsbourg not to release it. He agreed. The following year, Gainsbourg re-recorded the song with British actress Jane Birkin. That version became a massive hit across Europe and one of the most notorious songs of the era. The version with Brigitte remained unreleased until 1986, when it finally came out and became a download hit in 2006, when Universal Records made its back catalog available online. Brigitte also collaborated with Sacha Distel, Bob Zachary, and others. She had a distinctive voice, not technically perfect, but intimate and breathy, perfectly suited to the French chanson style. She performed on television variety shows, most notably The Brigitte Bardot Show in 1967, where she sang with both Distel and Gainsbourg. The price of fame. By the late 1960s, Brigitte was struggling. The constant attention, the paparazzi, the invasion of privacy, it was destroying her. Fans would enter her home uninvited, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or steal something that belonged to her. She couldn't go anywhere without being mobbed. The pressure led to depression and drinking. She attempted to end her own life multiple times. In 1960, after a breakup, she took sleeping pills. She survived. In 1967, another attempt. Again, she survived. And in September 1983, on her 49th birthday, after breaking up with her then-lover Alain Bougrain-Dubourg, she took tranquilizers with wine and walked into the surf near her Saint-Tropez home. She was pulled out and her stomach was pumped at a local clinic. These weren't cries for attention. Brigitte was genuinely suffering, caught between the image everyone demanded she maintain and the person she actually was. She'd never wanted fame. It had been thrust upon her at 15 when that Elle magazine cover appeared, and now, at nearly 50, she couldn't escape it. In the early 1970s, Brigitte made a decision. She appeared in her final films, Les Novices in 1970, Boulevard du Rhum in 1971, Les Pétroleuses in 1971, and finally, L'Histoire très bonne et très joyeuse de Colino Trousse-Chemise in 1973. Just before she turned 39, Brigitte Bardot announced her retirement from acting. She called it a way to get out elegantly. In 1974, Playboy magazine featured Brigitte in a nude photo shoot celebrating her 40th birthday. It was her final public statement as a sex symbol. After that, she walked away for good. Transformation into activism. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Brigitte's interest in animal welfare had actually begun much earlier. In 1962, she'd seen photographs of how animals were killed in slaughterhouses. The images haunted her. She immediately began advocating against the use of painful electric shock pistols, and she became a vegetarian, rare for someone of her generation and background. In 1967, she was received at the Élysée Palace to meet with President Charles de Gaulle. She lobbied him on animal welfare issues. Years later, she succeeded in getting the French government to mandate stunning before slaughter. In 1977, Brigitte traveled to Canada with Paul Watson, founder of the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, to protest the hunting of baby harp seals. She posed lying down next to seal pups on the ice floe. The photographs were distributed worldwide, bringing international attention to the seal hunt. Brigitte and Watson remained friends for decades. In 1986, she established the Brigitte Bardot Foundation for the Welfare and Protection of Animals. To fund it, she auctioned off her jewelry and personal belongings, raising 3 million francs. The foundation campaigned against the fur trade, the consumption of horse meat, bullfighting, and cruel treatment of animals in circuses and zoos. In 2011, the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society renamed one of its vessels the MV Brigitte Bardot in her honor. She had become one of the most visible animal rights activists in the world, using her fame for a cause she genuinely cared about. But her activism was not without controversy. Brigitte's strong personality and outspoken nature, which had served her well as an actress, sometimes got her into trouble as an activist. Her criticism of certain cultural practices involving animals led to accusations and legal troubles that would follow her into old age. The controversial later years. In 1992, Brigitte married for the 4th time. Bernard Dormal was a former advisor to Jean-Marie Le Pen, leader of France's far-right National Front Party. The marriage raised eyebrows. Brigitte had always been apolitical during her acting career, focused on her own life and relationships. But as she aged, she became increasingly outspoken on political topics, often aligning with conservative and nationalist viewpoints. Her comments about immigration and Islam in France led to repeated legal troubles. Between 1997 and 2021, Brigitte was fined 6 separate times for inciting racial hatred. She wrote books and open letters criticizing what she saw as the Islamization of France, attacking ritual slaughter practices, and making inflammatory statements about immigration. In her 1999 book, she wrote an open letter titled "Open Letter to My Lost France," stating that France was being invaded by an overpopulation of foreigners, especially Muslims. A French court fined her 30,000 francs. She would be fined again and again for similar remarks. In 2019, she was fined a sixth time after writing an op-ed referring to inhabitants of Réunion Island as people who had kept the genes of savages. These remarks damaged her reputation significantly. Many people who had admired her activism found her political views troubling. Animal rights organizations distanced themselves from her more controversial statements while still acknowledging her work for animals. Brigitte remained married to Dormal. By 2017, both were in their 70s and still smoking. She lived primarily at her Saint-Tropez villa, La Madrague, occasionally visiting other properties she owned in France. She rarely gave interviews and avoided the spotlight she'd once dominated. Her relationship with her son Nicholas remained strained. She had two granddaughters, Anna and Thea, but as of 2009, she admitted she had not seen her son in over a decade and had no contact with her granddaughters. They lived in Norway with their father and didn't speak French. The enduring icon. Despite the controversies, Brigitte Bardot's influence on fashion, beauty, and popular culture remains undeniable. The Bardot neckline, a wide-open neck that exposes both shoulders, is named after her. She popularized the style with off-the-shoulder sweaters and dresses that became iconic in the 1960s. Her signature look, tousled blonde hair, cat-eye makeup, full lips, inspired generations of models. Claudia Schiffer, Anna Ewers, Lara Stone, Doutzen Kroes, and Georgia Jagger have all been called Baby Bardots for their resemblance to her look. Nicole Kidman wore Bardot-esque hair in a 2013 Jimmy Choo campaign. In 2015, a survey in the UK ranked Brigitte number 6 in the top 10 most beautiful women of all time. In 2020, Vogue named her the most beautiful French actress of all time. Film historians include her in lists of the most accomplished, talented, and beautiful actresses in cinema history. In 2023, France 2 broadcast Bardot, a television series starring Julia de Nunez that chronicled Brigitte's career from her first casting at age 15 through the filming of The Truth 10 years later. Interest in her story continues, particularly among those fascinated by how a reluctant star navigated fame and ultimately rejected it. Brigitte acted in 47 films over 21 years. She recorded more than 60 songs. She became the face of an era, representing the sexual revolution, the French New Wave, the liberation of women from conventional morality, and then she walked away from all of it to dedicate herself to protecting animals. In 1985, she was awarded France's Legion of Honor, one of the country's highest distinctions. She refused to accept it. That refusal was very Brigitte Bardot. She'd spent her whole life rejecting the honors and expectations society tried to force upon her. The woman behind the icon. Looking back at Brigitte Bardot's life, what stands out is the distance between the public image and the private reality. The world saw a carefree sex goddess, a woman who lived for pleasure. But Brigitte was deeply unhappy for much of her life. She struggled with depression, attempted to end her own life multiple times, and found genuine solace only with animals, not people. She was a reluctant star from the beginning. Roger Vadim pushed her into acting. The public demanded she maintain an image of perpetual youth and sexuality. Directors cast her in roles that often reduced her to her physical appearance. Even when she tried to do more serious work, like Contempt, critics often focused on her body rather than her performance. Brigitte's honesty about motherhood was shocking, but also brave. In an era when women were expected to find complete fulfillment in having children, she admitted she'd never wanted to be a mother, that she'd found the experience traumatic. That honesty destroyed her relationship with her son, but also liberated countless women who felt the same way, but couldn't say it. Her romantic life reads like a novel. 4 marriages, countless affairs, passionate relationships that burned hot and fast. She loved intensely but couldn't seem to find lasting happiness in romantic partnerships. Animals, paradoxically, gave her the unconditional love and acceptance she'd never found with people. The controversies of her later years are troubling and can't be dismissed. Her statements about Muslims and immigrants caused real harm and justified criticism. But they also seem consistent with someone who'd always said exactly what she thought, regardless of consequences. Brigitte never learned to filter herself, never developed the politician's skill of measured speech. That lack of filter served her well as a young actress rebelling against convention. It served her poorly as an aging activist in an increasingly diverse France. At 90 years old, Brigitte Bardot remains one of the most iconic figures of the 20th century. Her face is instantly recognizable. Her films are still watched and studied. Her influence on fashion and beauty endures. She changed cinema, helping to usher in a new era of frankness about sexuality and the female body. But more than that, she lived on her own terms. She rejected Hollywood when it came calling. She walked away from fame at 39 when most actresses would have clung to it desperately. She devoted the second half of her life to animals, raising millions for their protection. She made mistakes, said terrible things, damaged relationships that should have mattered, but she was always, undeniably, herself. The wild life of Brigitte Bardot from Contempt was wilder than any script. It was filled with passion, pain, beauty, cruelty, liberation, and controversy. It was a life lived at full volume, without apology, without regret. And that, perhaps more than any of her films, is what makes her story so compelling. She was never just Brigitte Bardot, the icon. She was always Brigitte, the complicated, difficult, brilliant woman underneath. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more fascinating stories.